Hi, Laban. Thank you so much for joining me on the Health Evolution Collective. It's great to have you here.
Tracy, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute thrill and a real honor, I must say. So thank you.
Thank you. And the honor is all mine. I love meeting people in the health evolution space doing amazing things. And of course, I only recently came across you and was really excited to hear about your story. And, you know, I think our watchers and listeners today are going to really enjoy hearing your evolution too. So how would you like to start? Maybe by telling everyone a little bit about what you're doing now, and then, you know, what was the journey like to sort of get to where you are today?
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled to announce to the world that in the last really 6 months, I think, maybe 6 to 8 months, I really figured out what my purpose on this planet is. And my new, very grandiose goal is to become the most impactful motivational speaker on the planet. And the reason behind that is through the experience that I've gone through, particularly in the last 5 years, I've come to learn a few things, certainly about myself, but about other people that I think that everyone should have the opportunity to learn about and make their own decisions. And so I'm even thinking about ways to impact that ability to get that message out there, whether that be, you know, moving to career in politics or whatever it might be. So it's been an exciting 12 months, certainly. Having gone through my own major sort of 180 in the last 5 years has made me realize that I want to be a speaker, a motivational speaker. I want to coach people. And I have this other new passion of hosting this podcast series called Become Your Own Superhero. And the concept behind that particular show is to speak to people that have, you know, much like yourself, Tracy, an amazing story to share that will really ignite the spark in other people and get people to take life into their own hands and do it for themselves. Because the sooner you realize that it's up to you and you alone, the better off you'll be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The first thing I say to my clients is, it's not your fault that you're here, but it is your responsibility to move on from here. And, you know, so often I think we sit there in one spot like Groundhog Day and not really realizing that it is our responsibility. And, you know, we don't have to keep on that treadmill doing the same things all the time. And just someone saying that, you know, it's like, oh, really? Okay. You know, I can start to see a whole lot of new opportunities and all that sort of stuff just from that. So I love what you are doing, and I think you're going to really have a huge impact, especially, as you said, igniting the spark. And that's a huge, I guess, focus of what I do too. You know, I'm not about dogma. I'm not about getting people to do things the way I've done things. All I want people to see is that there is other ways to see things and there is other opportunities. And, you know, we can really touch people a lot more effectively if we connect with them and just open that door and light that spark, rather than saying, this is the way you should do things. Why are you doing that? Which I think a lot of people do as well. And I can't see that being your style.
Well, I one of the things that really used to upset me, Tracy, would be a fat personal trainer, or and I don't mean disrespect to anyone that's going through their own journey, but you know what I mean, like people that didn't practice what they preached. And so a lot of the stuff that I talk about, it's really important that I practice what I preach, and I'll be the first to put my hand up and say, you know what, I fucked up. You know, let's start again. Or if I learn something that, you know, it might be contradictory to everything that I've always known, but I realize it's the truth, then I will put my hand up again and say, you know what, this is the direction I'm going in now. I was wrong. And I think that's one of the things that's become really important. I'm a human being. I'm fallible. I make mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I seem to be making less mistakes now that I'm not drinking and gambling and boozing and philandering and doing all these other ridiculous things.
All right. So I'm going to come back to that because I've got some great stuff to get your thoughts on around making mistakes. But before we do that, can we talk about what the last 5 years has looked like for you?
Yeah, you can. So 5 years ago, nearly to the day it would have been, Tracy, I found myself in my bedroom in my apartment in Melbourne here on a Tuesday night with about 3 bottles of red wine coursing through my veins, betting the last of my rent money on a horse race in a country I wasn't even in. And I had a moment, an epiphanous moment, where I was like, this is not the direction that my life is supposed to be heading. And I made a really brave decision to call the Gamblers Helpline, which was on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. And I spoke to this wonderful guardian angel woman. Her name was Mary, incidentally, Mary Magdalene, maybe. And she was a counselor, and she'd been counseling for 30 years in gambling. And she spoke about the incredibly high rates of suicide with regards to gamblers versus the other addictive behaviors, because of how quickly you can lose everything. And it really jolted me at that time. And I got access to this psychologist through the Salvation Army, which was for free, which you get access to if you reach out for help with some of these institutions. Wonderful, wonderful things. And they're ironically, they're funded by a lot of the tax dollars that they get from the gambling anyway. So I got access to the psychologist for a year and a half, and that was probably the best bet that I ever made, because I was actually getting a great return on it. But after the very first session with the psychologist, I realized that a lot of the destructive behavior that I was exhibiting, and I had big problems with alcohol, with recreational drug use, with, I say philandering, but like promiscuity, whatever you want to call it, and limiting self-beliefs and negative self-talk. And it all stemmed from escapism that developed in my childhood as a result of growing up in a dysfunctional environment. And for me, it was nothing more innocuous than being a child of divorce and having a mum and dad who were doing the best they could with the tools they had available, but they were ill-equipped to handle themselves, let alone their children at that time. And when I started to understand this, it really sent me down this pathway of healing and self-discovery and forgiveness, and then getting to a point where I finally loved who I was. Because when you really love who you are, you respect yourself, and you start doing things that someone that respects themselves does, like getting yourself fit and healthy and mentally strong. And that's sort of the journey I've been on, and it's an ongoing one, but I'm very proud to announce that August 26th, 2020 will be my 4th year of sobriety. And in December, it will have been 5 years since I laid a single bet on anything. And I lost 60 pounds in between that as well. So, and kept it off. So life is good.
Wow. An amazing story that, really resonates with me. I mean, I grew up with a brother who was addicted to gambling he's 53, 52 now, and from 15, it's been an ongoing thing for him, and it has been kind of many addictions, but the gambling was the one that called him all the time. And, I didn't grow up in a dysfunctional family. My parents are still together. God bless them. They're in Sydney, but they gain. I think we all do the best we can with what we've got. It's tough. I don't know what it was for my brother. My other brother was a police inspector, and we're all living our own lives, but for some reason for him it was the gambling. And I remember talking to him probably about 10 years ago, and he's just he just said, Tracy, it's like for him it's like every minute he's awake it's on his mind, and all those urges to do it. And sometimes he's strong and he can white knuckle his way through it, and sometimes he can't. And at the moment he's just coming to the end of have you heard of the rehab place in Perth? It's like a really it's not Salvation Army, but it's like an army, and they take them in for like 2 years minimum, and
Wow.
just basically strip them back to nothing and rebuild them. I wish I could think of the name, because it's been on, it's not been on Australian Story. The guy that runs it is an addict himself, an ex-addict. And I think for the first time in his life, he can see hope. He's had 2 one failed marriage. He's got kids coming everywhere from everywhere. And it's like, well, you're 53 now, Marty. Amazing. You're going to have the chance to have relationships now with your kids. And, like part of the process is ringing all his family and apologizing. And, he rang me and he said, I want to say sorry. I said, you don't have to say sorry to me. You're my brother. I love you. I know that you didn't mean to do anything that you did. And anytime you're ready to come back in my life, you can come back in, we're here. And, cried. He's like, thank you, and I think we can be like that. I understand, when you're driven, it doesn't matter whether it's food or gambling or sex or alcohol, when you are driven by that and you don't, so you have a choice in that, it's just compassion that people, like that need. And yeah, sorry, I don't really share that very often. There won't be many people that will know that story, but I think, I'm so happy that you've been able to turn things around, because it isn't easy, but it's definitely possible. And I think one of the things you said in the beginning, it is your responsibility to do it. And there has to be something that occurs to make you see that. And was it that lady for you, or was it something else?
Look, it was a combination of a few different things, Tracy. I had a couple of moments, or a couple of instances in my mid-30s, where one incident involved me running away from the police after being booted out from a nightclub after an alcohol and drug-fueled evening, and a bouncer told me to F off as I was leaving the premises. And I typically hadn't been a really sloppy drunk, but this particular night I'd skipped dinner and had lots of spirits and a bit of cocaine. And the cocaine would normally sort of level you out, but not on this occasion. And as I was leaving, he told me to go a certain direction. And I lipped back, which was something that I never really did. And as I did, there was about 6 police officers standing at the base of the stairs. And one of them said, "Oi, you watch your mouth." And then I turned around and said, "Oh yeah, go fuck yourself." And I legged it. And I don't know if you've ever run from the police before, but it's quite exhilarating.
No.
But I gassed them. I'm pretty rapid over a short period of distance. And I thought, this is amazing. And I had people on the street egging me on. It was like midnight on a Friday night in Melbourne. And these footsteps, just disappeared off into nothing. I was like, I've outrun the police here. And then like 4 patrol cars flew up. It was in Burke Street, and they flew up that tram section. Yeah. And they flew past me, and I doubled back and hid in this really amazing hidey spot, only to be megaphoned out with a "freeze, come on with your hands," and came out, and I had guns and pepper spray and tasers pointed at me. And what had happened was someone had, fitting my description, had actually coward punched someone right near where I'd been, or king hit as it used to be known, right? And that had nothing to do with me, but I'd got sort of caught up in this. And when you think about what happened with George Floyd earlier this year, it could have easily gone south. And in a cruel twist of irony, I was actually the star of an advertisement for an anti-violence campaign called Step Back Think, which was recorded only months earlier. And so while I'm being handcuffed by these police, they're watching this video of me on YouTube, and because I'm trying to explain who I am. And amazingly, I actually was let off without charge. And I woke up the next day, and I was like, talk about a close call. And there was that, and then a number of other smaller incidents that I think just went, you know what, I'm not kicking ass in the way that I always thought I was going to. And then that's where I sort of reached out for help. But that comment about what you're saying with regards to your upbringing, one of the things that I learned, Tracy, was that one of these huge studies that did this ACEs study in America between the late 90s and early 2000s, I think it was, tens of thousands of kids, but they did these MRI scans on children that had been exposed to explosions in Syria during the war. And there was a physical damage that happened to the brain as a result of trauma, not the explosion, but trauma. And they did the same brain scans on children in the Western world that had been subject to sexual abuse. And it was virtually the same impact on that area of the brain. And what that taught me is that you cannot diminish your own experience of trauma, and whatever that might be. And there's a really helpful book for anyone that identifies with any of the stuff that we touch on today, that was given to me by a friend of mine who was going through 12-step cocaine addiction. It's called Facing Codependence by Pia Mellody. Okay. And it's available on Audible, and you can get a hard copy. It's not available on Kindle, but Facing Codependence by Pia Mellody. It changed my life. But it just helps you understand everything. And if you're the sibling of someone who's going through all of this stuff, it'll help you understand and be a better support network.
Fantastic, fantastic. So can I talk a little bit about your nutrition journey? Because you said you lost 60 pounds. So you ran from the police. Were you 60 pounds heavier when you did that too? You must be like Flash Gordon now.
Yeah, I've always been strong, and over, a couple 100 meters, I wasn't too bad, but I think it was just the alcohol and drugs. But the thing that really, I think, ramped up the healing, Tracy, was I saw a podcast in 2017 with it was the Joe Rogan podcast, which a lot of people know about, and he was interviewing Chris Kresser, who's a functional medicine guy, and Chris spoke about the link between gluten intolerance and heartburn. Now, I had suffered from GERD for 17 years, which I'd been on medication for, 20 to 40 milligrams of omeprazole or Somac, or, the Zantac stuff. That's the second most prescribed medication on the planet, I think. And when I saw that, I was like, I wonder if that's me. And I'd given up drinking at that point. And I think my stomach had healed enough for things to start functioning again. And so the heartburn went away. I was told it was an incurable genetic disorder, like a lot of, dogma that we're fed from the medical fraternity with regards to what is curable, what's not. It was something so innocuous as just cutting gluten out of my diet. And I was like, what else are they wrong about? And that sent me on this crazy health journey where I ended up seeing Sean Baker's interview on Joe Rogan, adopting this carnivorous diet. And next month, it'll actually be 2 years where I've been a dirty carnivore, what they call a dirty carnivore. So I've
explain that.
So the carnivore diet really is just any animal protein, and you can include dairy in there as well, which is what I've been pretty much exclusively eating for the last 2 years. So I'd say about 98% of whatever I've eaten has been animal protein. I don't eat really veggies or anything anymore out of necessity. And during the 2 years that I've done that, Tracy, I have lost an additional, I lost the majority of the weight during that time, but I've put on 8 kilos of muscle mass and half a kilo of skeletal bone density, which, and I'm not a bodybuilder. I have done a little bit of weights here and there, but like probably no less than, a dozen times. I'm a runner, and I started ultra running during that period. I went from running 5 kilometers in May of 2018 to completing my first marathon later that month in 3:56. I ran a 50K in July of that year, and then I completed the Surf Coast Century, which is a 100K trail run, in September of 2018. And it's supposed to be a catabolic exercise where you burn muscle, and I've just been stacking it on. And it's had such a profound effect on my mental health, on my resilience, on my recovery, on my physique. Like, it's been a game changer.
Yes. Well, if you had said to me 12 months ago that you didn't eat vegetables, I would have gone, what? But I've been getting comfortable with the idea for quite some time now. And again, yes, I mean, my husband is a Joe Rogan, listens to everyone. And he was like, when that Joe Rogan one came on with Sean Baker, he's like, get this, there's this guy, Dr. Sean Baker, and he only eats meat. And he's like, it was such an interesting podcast, blah, blah, blah. And I think because one of the things we sort of say is, when someone speaks who is smarter than you, you kind of listen. And it was kind of that, like for us, it was Tim Noakes, Professor Tim Noakes, who I know you've talked to. He was the guy that took us down the low carb path. When you just know someone that, he's definitely way smarter than us, so we're going to listen. So when we listen to that one, we're like, okay, we're going to listen. And we've been dabbling in it, and I'm actually 9 days into a 30-day carnivore myself. So, yeah.
Well done. I'm very excited to hear that. How are you feeling? How are you feeling so far?
I feel amazing. So I did have a little bit of and I was surprised. So here's my thought pattern was I'd already cut out veggies for my first meal. So I eat 1 to 2 meals a day. I train. So my training's weight. I love resistance training. Used to be a runner, but I love doing weights now.
Yeah.
So I always do that. Then I'll eat, sometimes, or I'll wait for dinner. But that first meal has always just been not always, but for the last 6 months, it's been protein and fat. So I always had my veggies or my salad or whatever with my second meal. So I sort of thought was that, and plus it was only a bit of, I'd have a bit of dark chocolate, or because I've got a family and I like to make keto cookies or a keto cake, and maybe I would have had a bit of that, not every day, but so I was like, gee, it's not mentally not much of a step, and I didn't think there would be much going on in my body, but yeah, a little bit. I had a few days of, I don't know if you've heard Joe Rogan talk about his experience. I don't want to say it because it's embarrassing, but yeah, I suppose
diarrhea, everybody, diarrhea.
Yeah. All right. I'm going red now.
I'll say it so you don't have to.
Thank you. A little bit of that.
Symptoms.
I know.
Perfectly natural.
Yes.
Perfectly natural.
Yeah. And I had the itch when I first went keto. I obviously detoxed through my skin, and some of my clients have had this as well. I didn't get the rash, but just itchy for a couple of days, like it drove me nuts. But thankfully, that's all settled down now. And I'm primarily doing it for curiosity because, yes, I've got a few clients wanting to try it. And I've spoken to dietitians, I've read, done, that it's certainly for a reset, and it's completely safe. You are getting what you need. Maybe you got to supplement I supplement with magnesium, and I do take a liver capsule, but there's debate about whether you need that. So anyway, but primarily for me, it was to lose my belly fat. Like I've been doing this for 7 years. I train, and I've had 5 kids, and then, I kept saying to myself, oh, you've had 5 kids, you're going to have a jelly belly, blah, blah, blah. And then I thought, you know what, I'm going to just see if this makes a difference. And I've already lost 2 centimeters off my waist, and it has not budged for years.
There you go.
I've just, the bloating, you can kind of just see it starting to come in. And I think I'm a huge fan of it if it's something that, people are curious enough to try it, particularly with, this is what irks me. People with autoimmune conditions can do extremely well on doing this, yet the pervasive myth is that you have to eat the rainbow and increase your fiber and increase your vegetables, and it just, to me, it just keeps them, there's no, they're not going to have any chance of healing if that's what they're doing. So I think it's fantastic. And look at you, 2 years on.
Well, I'm so happy that you're trying this, because the thing about this, like, I don't care what anyone eats. Mm-hmm. And there's a caveat with that, right? I want the truth. I want the truth, right? Then I can make an informed decision. And thankfully, I've been quite a pig-headed individual in my life, and I don't like being told what to do. And I think that's sort of got me down this path. But when I was born, as soon as I was born, I had blocked tear ducts, which they operated on, and which is, I've never heard of this before, but I had a small amount of antibiotics. And then when I was about 2.5, I got a really bad case of bacterial meningitis. I had it for 5 days before I was diagnosed, and it's got about a 30 to 40% mortality rate within 48 hours, I think, if it's not diagnosed. And I came out the other side totally unscathed, as far as I can tell. And it normally, people lose limbs and a lot of brain damage and blind and mute, all sorts of stuff. But I was smashed with antibiotics as a kid. And there seems to be, not always, but seems to be a prevailing sort of correlation between anyone that's gone through large amounts of antibiotics or whatever that develops these autoimmune diseases. And they're even thinking that anxiety and depression are all autoimmune related now. And as soon as you start understanding the relationship between what goes in your stomach and how you feel, it's really empowering. Because I do this for the mental health. So, like, if you made me pick one, it'd be the mental health benefits.
Yeah.
Because when your mental health is strong, you are productive and you are not fearful and you are brave and you are like that. My productivity in the last 2 years, Tracy, I've achieved more in the last 2 years than I have in the previous 38. Like I'm not even exaggerating with these numbers. And it's a direct correlation to fixing my gut health and putting the right fuel in. And have I been perfect on this diet? No. Do I have ice cream and cheat from time to time? My oath. I've been struggling with sugar addiction for a long, long time. But I'm getting better and better and better and better and better. And that's the whole point of this thing. So
yeah.
I'm so excited because it took me a year before I really started noticing the amazing benefits. And you're noticing benefits within 8 days.
Amazing. I think, I mean, everyone's going to be different, aren't they? But, I think for me, for my body, it was just this little step, like it was a little bit that's going to make a difference, because I'm nearly 47, I'm perimenopausal now. So I'm starting to get all these, it's nothing too bad, but just noticing a little bit of change. And I'm just very curious to see how this impacts, things like my sleep. My sleep was starting to go out the window. But the last 2 nights, I have slept like my husband beautifully.
Well, for all the women out there as well, my fiance, my new fiance from last month, Anna,
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And she eats what I eat. I eat what she eats. She probably has a little bit more fruit than me, but she's got a visible 8-pack. And she's just 3/4 Russian, 1/4 Japanese, genuine stunner inside and out.
Beautiful.
And so it works, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, fantastic. Can I just explore with you a little bit more about the mental wellness, I guess, that you've experienced since a change? Because it's something I've talked about with a number of people actually, and I see it. I've seen it in myself. I've seen it in my clients as well. It's kind of like something happens when we switch what we eat. So we go along. I went along till I was 40 in this what I thought was a normal, which eventually to me looked like sludging through a hangover every day. Just having enough energy to actually get up, look after my kids. And by the end of the day, I was knackered. There was nothing more in me. And I just, that's normal. That's normal. I'm getting older. I'm 40, blah, blah, blah. But when we do make the change and we start to link what we eat with how we feel, because a lot of people don't, right? Like, we always justify it. We make excuses, or it's too hard, or we don't want to do it, or whatever. But when it finally happens and you experience a lift in like the brain fog, which I've heard so many people say, I didn't even know I had it. I was living in this cloud all the time. So I've changed and cleaned up my diet, started eating a species appropriate diet, if you like. So what we've evolved to eat, things start to lift, and it's like you wake up to life. And I've seen, and myself is in that, and you're in that, and so many people that start to live a life they never thought was possible for them, carve out stuff. And I'm in your boat. Like, I am, my productivity, all the time people are like, you've got 5 kids and a business and homeschooling. Oh, how do you do what you do? And it's like, I don't know. You just do. You just have a huge amount of energy. You just do what has to be done. And I think you don't fear the possibilities of what might be possible. So can you share how that looks to you and how that did open up for you?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll just share the story, because I think this is really appropriate in the context of this. Because when I was going through that when I started running, Tracy, when I started doing this distance running, there was a couple of instances when I ran my very first big run, which was 24 kilometers, and I did it fasted. And it was when I started doing a ketogenic diet and I dropped a few pounds. I got to about the 13 or 14 kilometer mark, and I inexplicably burst into the most guttural, like weeping that I'd ever experienced. And it continued to happen, and it would only happen for about a minute, which is a long time actually when you're running.
Yes.
And it happened for about a year. And what I think, because this is a very holistic process for me. It's not just one particular thing, but I was doing a lot of self-development. I was doing a lot of healing, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I really think that this was from a biological point of view, because my gut was healing and I was burning off excess fat. That I think a lot of, I don't know how many science behind this yet, but I think there's a lot of trauma that's stored in fat. It makes sense that fat stores toxins. So why wouldn't it store negative emotions? Maybe, I don't know. It was too profound for me not to pay any attention to that type of thing. And when that started happening, like I became a lot more conscious of the food and like, you know, when I very first went carnivore, I went, you know, like my body fat went from 14.4 at that time to 8.4 in 3.5 weeks. And I felt this little wee, like the only way I can describe it, Tracy, is like a little wee mini orgasm in my gut. And it wasn't a sexual thing. It was this really pleasant feeling. And that was with me for most of the time. The only time it would ever dissipate is when I ate some garbage. Do you know what I mean? Or did something along those lines, pushed myself a bit too hard. And that's sort of been with me this whole time. And, you know, when you talk about the mental health side of things, it's so obvious to me if I'm feeling a little bit flat, I will eat a steak. I'll eat a really beautiful, you know, grass-fed steak from my butcher, Gary's Quality Meats down in Pram Market, and it lifts me up. It's like what a glass of alcohol used to do, or a line of cocaine, but you don't get the hangover or the you know, the toxic effect on the body. I've become a lot more in tune with being way more empathetic, and my ego is way more in check, and I'm way more attentive to other people's emotions. And I've gotten rid of the people that were in my life that weren't lifting me up. I've lost probably 97% of my circle of friends. And it's not that there's anything wrong with these people, but like we just don't serve each other in the same way anymore. And that's been a whole part of this whole process. Like there was about 100 things I had to tick off before I was able to start really flourishing. And that's where I'm at now. I've still got lots and lots of work to do, but my God, I'm in a way better place. And you know, like, to give you some ideas with regards to the tenacity or the mental toughness or the resilience, like even after I got everything in check, Anna and I got together nearly 2 years ago. I made a decision late in 2018 to go out and set up my own recruitment business, which I'd been doing for 14 years, to try and get myself out of a hole financially that I'd got myself into during my debaucherous years. And the next 12 months were a total unmitigated disaster financially, where I nearly went bankrupt about 4 times. And during that period of time, Anna and I went through an ectopic and have gone through 4 additional miscarriages. And so at the end of 2019, I was like at my financial rock bottom, and I was like, holy God, like anyone else in this situation would have killed themselves and thrown themselves off the Westgate. And the way that I handled those situations, I never once cracked or went back to drinking or gambling or whatever. I never flew off the handle and abused anyone or did anything that was like out of character. I was like measured and calm, and I was able to process what was going on and formulate an outcome. And that's why I'm so passionate about looking after myself now, physically, you know, and particularly with diet, because of that response. And, you know, and then I took a job back at the start of 2020 back in working for someone in recruitment because I needed the money. And then all of a sudden COVID hit. And I was like, I'm battle hardened for this now, motherfucker. And excuse the French out there. And I was like, bring this on. And that's been the journey so far. It changes the way that you attack life, and you are no longer on the receiving end. You are the one making the decisions. And again, it's not a perfect science, but it's working pretty damn well so far.
Yeah, well, I love that. And, I would make the argument that feeling that you've been living in and, how you've been experiencing the last 12 to 18 months is our natural state. And that's what we've all got inside us. And we all have that ability to tap into that. I so believe that, and because I teach, resilience, if well, not teach, but part of my job is showing people their innate resilience. We've all got this stuff within us. And the strongest, or how do you say it? I guess how you've done it and how I've done it with looking at food and knowing and believing that what you eat fuels, your body in one way or another. And but you combine that with all the other stuff, then it's a full body and it's a full picture thing. It's not just looking at your mind, or it's not just looking at your body. You combine the power of both, and you can tap into, what is yours innately. And, amazing. I love that. What a great story. You're just going to keep going, and fantastic.
Oh, well, it's become really important. It's become bigger than me now, Tracy. It's become, it's now my responsibility to lead the way, and like even within my own family.
Yeah.
My mum is one of 4 siblings, and every single one of the siblings has gone through their own major addictive issues, and there's 9 of their children, including me and my brothers, that have all suffered from various levels of escapism type behavior: drinking, gambling, drugs, prostitution, some of the female cousins, but what's happening now though is that people are starting to pay attention, because they can now see their cousin or their brother Laban, who's physically totally transformed. And I'll happily provide the viewers a before and after. The weight loss is significant, but it's the change in physicality that's so profound. It doesn't even look like me. And I don't think it is me. And so they're seeing this and they're going, what's he doing? And what I really am so excited about is I firmly believe that we've broken that cycle of dysfunction in that part of the family, because it's starting to infiltrate in other parts. And my younger brother, who's got 3 kids, the way he's raising that family, him and his beautiful wife, those kids are not going to grow up exposed to that same dysfunction. And it's just so empowering. And so now that's why I want to share this with as many people that want to listen, and not to try and tell anyone what to do, because that never works. But people that are ready to take the step in the next chapter of their life and want help, like I wanted help, that they've got access to it. And that's what really sets me alight.
Well, never underestimate the power of one. I think you can have a huge impact on people around you when you live your life and see life in a certain way. It can't help but rub off. And you're right, like you can't change it. I had to learn the hard way. What's that quote? Yesterday I was something and I wanted to change the world, but today I'm wise and I just want to change myself, or something like that. Like, just we hear something like, and we see it all the time, people finding an amazing lift by changing their diet, and they want to tell the world. But of course, unless people want to listen, it's just, it is what it is, but it doesn't mean that you don't sing, and it doesn't mean that you don't. And there's always someone, I just so believe that just by speaking, someone who needs to hear it will hear it. And, what a gift to be able to impact your family like that. It's just fantastic.
Well, same with you, Tracy. I mean, it's like the work that you've been doing, and that your productivity with these podcasts has been nothing short of extraordinary. Like, I thought I had a high work output. Plus you say you got 5 kids and a husband to maintain as well. So, you are doing phenomenal things. So you should be very proud.
Oh, thank you. I do love it, and that's mostly, isn't it? It's really important when you love it and you're passionate about it. It doesn't. Yeah, it's not work.
It's not.
No. Now I want to take it back to something I said I was going to come back to. We touched on in the beginning about being able to say you're wrong and being able to change direction. I'm reading this amazing book, and I have to recommend it to you and everybody listening. It is one of the best books I've ever read. It's called Mistakes Were Made, But Not by Me. And it's, yes.
What a great title.
A great title. And it's by two people. Carol Tavris is one. I can't remember the second author. Of course, I haven't brought it with me, but I'll put all the information below. And they are social psychologists, and she was baffled by the apparent inability of some people to change their mind even in the face of obvious facts. So why is it that we can, or some people, and most people, because when you understand, she delved all into the research and did all this stuff looking at so many things, like even going back to presidents who, have the war on terror, or, convincing us that there's weapons of mass destruction when, there never was any. But how, we travel down this path of belief and what we do to keep us on that path, and why we won't change, why we won't admit we're wrong and admit we're sorry. And I'm thinking about this all the time with the dietary guidelines. And, you talked to Dr. James Muki, and thank you to you. I'm going to be talking to him next week as well.
Fantastic. It's a must watch. It's a must watch. Yeah.
And he has been instrumental in bringing about this review of the dietary guidelines. Now, of course, that's all happened in the US recently, and it's even worse what they've come out with the recommendations. It's just even worse than it was. And, you read and understand what's going on. So just to try and summarize it, but basically, as human beings, the brain is a trick. It tricks us all the time. And when we come across when we create a belief about something that we're very vested in, if something comes along that is contrary to that, we have obviously choices. We can either look at it and go, okay, this is really uncomfortable. I might have to admit I'm wrong, but I'm willing to go down this path and look at, the facts. But what most people actually do is say, well, no, that's too uncomfortable. I'm going to create a different scenario in my mind to help justify my beliefs because of the feeling that it creates when it's, I don't want to have to admit I'm wrong. That feels humiliating and awful. And that is you see it all the time. Now, of course, Prof. Noakes, and Peter Bruckner, who you've spoken to as well, both of them, like when I spoke to Peter, he said to me, I had to admit I was wrong. I had to admit for the 30 years I was giving people the wrong advice. It wasn't a very nice feeling at all, but I had to do it. And I think unless we start showing people that is okay to do that, and in fact, if you want to be a leader, and if you want to be able to create change and inspire people, I would actually think that is a necessary thing that you have to do. And it's going to instead take you down amazing paths instead of continuing in this path of, least resistance. And interesting, what they've discovered is that when people come across a new belief, if they've decided that it's too difficult for them, they will justify things in their mind, as I said, so that they don't have to change their beliefs. And they'll say something like, oh, well, it's in the best interest anyway, or, I still believe that. It doesn't matter what you say. And often they say, so if you're trying to change someone's mind, if you tell them the opposite, it's going to make it even worse. They will go further away from it. So, I'm reading this, I'm thinking, well, how on earth, how change is so hard. And this is why it is.
Well, it is, but I think in saying that as well, I have had to catch myself a lot by telling myself that it's hard, because one of the things I spoke about as well, like getting rid of a lot of those limiting self-beliefs, is that like, yeah, okay, there's been a few roadblocks, and yes, talking to, let's say, a strict vegan is basically beating your head against the wall, right? But this is what I think might be an alternate option, right? And this is a hypothetical at this point, but this was sparked from the conversation I had with Professor Tim Noakes, because I said to him, "Do you have any interest in getting in politics?" And he said, "Absolutely not."
Yeah.
And I was thinking, because I'm not a doctor, I haven't done any degrees or any of this stuff, but I thought, do you know what? I have been totally open and unabashed in sharing all of my failings for a long time now, publicly documented, particularly in the podcast as well, and anyone that knows me. And I just wonder if someone who is fit and strong and healthy, that has no skeletons in the closet, might not just make it to the top of the political tower and affect change from a prime ministerial level. And this is something that's relatively new in my mind. Politics is not something I've ever been really focused on, but I reckon that if you've got someone who leads by example, you can be very effective, and you can't have any sort of mud slung up against you because you've just got this history of honesty. So I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Tracy, but I'd need to renounce my New Zealand citizenship, but anything's possible. Because we've got to go at this another way.
Yeah, we do. Go for it. I'll vote for you.
I've no idea what party I'd run as. I might have to go as an independent, which being elected prime minister would be a miracle of God. But, Donald Trump getting into power showed to me that
possible.
Well, it is. And I disagree with lots of things he says. I also think he goes about certain things really well. And I'm not I don't get too involved in American politics, but that passion of wanting to help people, Dr. James Muker, who you're meeting, talks about, in 20 years or 19 years, Australia's going to spend 100% of its GDP on type 2 diabetes. Now, that's not a sustainable model. So what are we going to do to fix that? And if we don't intervene, then the world's going to spin off its axis. So something outrageous is going to happen. Maybe it's me being prime minister. I don't know.
Let's talk about that a little bit. We talked about before we started recording about, we're in Melbourne now. So whenever you are watching it, wherever you are, we're in this phase at the moment with COVID that is quite scary, and the numbers are just skyrocketing, and we're all kind of sitting here waiting to be put into stage 4 lockdown. And I've listened to so many podcasts of people who I rate and who are way smarter than me talk about things that we discussed in the beginning about the money, and the conversations don't seem to be focused in the right area, because we do know that people who are not metabolically healthy, are much more susceptible and much more at risk of getting this, but there doesn't seem to be any discussion in the conversation. Now, having said that, what's interesting in the UK, because Boris Johnson almost died from it, and because of the work that Asima Holtra has been doing, he's started the conversation about, obesity, diabesity, and the increased risk of COVID. And I'm watching that. I'm a bit skeptical that he might go down the calories in, calories out path. Hopefully Asim's in his ear and he's not going to do that. So they're changing the conversation over there a little bit, but I don't see any evidence of that here. What's your thoughts on that?
Look, it's an area that, like I say, that burden of responsibility, that burden of knowledge, rather, it's going to take something drastic to happen to someone significant. And when I look at the leaders of this country, male and female, apart from Tony Abbott, I can't think of really anyone that's in good shape. It's a physical.
Tony is in good shape. I'll give him that one.
Yeah, but it was before my time where I had any focus on politics. I think the reason why people didn't like him that much was for a number of for the same reasons that a lot of politicians aren't liked, because they appear disingenuous. And I think that's the area that I'd like to come from a different angle, right? And to be honest, Tracy, I don't know what the answer to it is. It's like when you're setting a goal, you don't write out the exact pathway of what you're going to do. You write with the end in mind, and then it sort of reverse engineers it from there. And, with people like Bruckner and Noakes and Muki and like Hasim Malhotra and Paul Mason and all these other people around the planet, like the evidence so overwhelming that what they are doing and what we're doing and living is working, that it has to reach a tipping point, because the customers that are funding a lot of the processed food and stuff are going to die. They'll drop off. They won't have a customer base anymore when everyone's dead. Like, so that the companies will have to change their business model. So I think it'll happen, but I just, this whole COVID thing has brought about a whole nother blind side of the side effect of metabolic ill health. In North America, 90% of the population is metabolically unhealthy, and 50% of everyone that's died from COVID has type 2 diabetes. So, and there's even some data that suggests that when the Spanish flu killed all those people back in the early 1900s, that a lot of it had to do with metabolic health. And so I'm only speculating with a lot of this stuff. I'm not an expert on this area, but I'd encourage people to go down and find their own path, because it's our responsibility to take this information and become familiar with it, because I learned early on that I can't rely on the information that I've been given by the medical fraternity, and I'm not bad mouthing doctors or surgeons, because they all serve their place. But when I spoke to Tim Noakes about if he was president of the planet, I said, what would you do? And he would totally disengage the pharmaceutical companies from the universities.
Good luck with that one. But that's exactly what, their reach is insidious. And I don't think people really understand just how, insidious it is. I've gone, there I am, back in focus. Yeah, I'm back. I thought that podcast chat that you did with Prof. Noakes was fantastic, and I loved what he was saying around, like it or not, the way the government's handling things is very, we don't really have much, we can do about it. But I loved his approach. He talked about if you're at risk, if you are elderly or you're metabolically ill, unhealthy, or cancer, autoimmune, you do need to protect yourself, and you do probably need to isolate. But for the healthy populations, we're the ones really that have got to really get this immunity out there. And I loved how he said that, we shouldn't be isolating. We should be out there. But I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. But,
I look, it's a really complicated one, Tracy. And I think that the thing that really, that genuinely concerns me, I have zero fear of even catching it or whatever. Like when you are this robust, and it might be an arrogance, but I don't think it is, because I don't get sick in the same way anymore at all. I lost my train of thought. The longer term effect of this is that with every % of unemployment, domestic violence goes up, child abuse goes up, like all of the other areas of society that no one wants to even acknowledge are going through the roof as we speak. And we haven't even seen the worst of it from an economic fallout. And when people start to get desperate, when they lose their jobs and you take away their livelihoods and you give them too much time on their hands, that's when the protests are going to start. And that's when the people in the streets and rioting and stuff. And I know this sounds like I'm sort of catastrophizing, and I really hope that there's another way to go about this, but this is sort of what's happened throughout history. And we don't look at history well enough with anything that we're looking at these days. And then if you look at history from a dietary point of view, for 200,000 years, we've thrived on this, animal protein diet. And then they bring in the start agriculture and start grains, and that's when everything started to go downhill. Like our brains were 150 cc's up until 10,000 years ago, and they started cropping grain and all that stuff, and it started to decrease in size. So we're actually getting stupider, which I find hilarious.
Yeah. I agree with you. Let's hope it doesn't go down that path. But yeah, I mean, how we forget history so quickly. You know, my husband is a history buff, and he's constantly telling me stuff about, you know, history. And I think history gives us perspective, and, you know, we ignore it at our peril, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was going to say one thing. It's easy to get caught up talking about a lot of this stuff and sounding like a lot of other people that have been quite negative. So I'd like to offer some things that might help, that have been helping me a little bit. And yeah, I don't know whether you were going to go into this or not, Tracy, but the simple art of practicing gratitude and coming from a place of love and abundance has been really powerful in helping the days that you are getting a bit flat, because it's really hard not to absorb the news at times and get caught up in conversations like this that can end up, you know, potentially bumming you out a little bit. So yeah, gratitude, and come from a place of love and abundance. What value can I input in this person's life that I'm going to have this interaction with, whatever it might be?
Yeah, I love that. And I think it is very easy to get caught up in the detail, but yes, taking a step back and looking at the big picture and the beauty. And if you look for that, you will see it. And it's everywhere. You know, there's an economy in the crazy and in the fear. And that's what, you know, economy is built on. But, you know, we can see beyond that and take a step back too. And also I think too, if you are, you know, we were talking to before we recorded, you know, I've had a few, you know, days where I've got caught up in it and haven't felt, you know, too good about it all. And,
yeah,
you know, I think that's normal too. You know, I think it's okay. It's okay to feel how you're feeling. You know, we don't have to fear that. That adds another layer to it. But I think, you know, seeing that there'll always be days where we'll feel that, then there'll be days when we won't feel that. You know, we kind of just go up and down on like an elevator, and that's a normal part of being a human being. And I think just knowing that it's okay, you know, will help you see past it a little bit quicker. Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, how would you like to end this, Laban? I'd love you to give some insight and wisdom. I know you've given so much in the talk, but if someone's sitting there, particularly a man, because I do have a male audience as well, although a lot of the work I do is with women, but this platform is particularly for men as well. And men, you know, I don't understand a man like you do. So I'd love you to share some of your wisdom to a man that might be sitting there who's not in the best of health, really doesn't know how to take that first step or what that first step should be. What would be your words of advice or wisdom?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on sort of where you're at in your own life, and this comes down to a bit of age, I think, as well. But what is your legacy going to be? What is the memory of you going to be long after you've left this planet? What impact on people's lives have you left? And I think if you can't answer that with any kind of decent answer, self-improvement or just empowering other people to take their life into their own hands, then maybe it's time to address looking at yourself. And the benefit of doing that is that when you start to give, you start getting back, and you get back a lot more than you tend to give. I don't know how it works, but it works. And when that starts happening in your life, you start getting this positive feedback loop, and you will live a way more productive, thriving, not surviving life. And that would be my encouragement to you. Be brave and be bold, and don't fear the unknown, because when you start to embrace that, your life will just evolve for the better.
I love it. What a beautiful way to end. Thank you so much for your time today. And if you are interested in getting in touch with Laban, all his details are below. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Tracy, thank you again for having me on. I am a huge fan of the work that you're doing and the impact that you're having on everyone's life that's been touched by this. And do not ever stop. Do not ever stop. You are doing God's work. I promise you that. So thank you again.
That's lovely. Thank you.